Hello, English 46A students. I hope you're all doing well. I wanted to talk a little bit about Mary Wroth. And I want to encourage that you read supporting material in our Norton. I want to encourage that you read the biographical material, not just with an eye for what it can tell you about, in this case, Mary Wroth, but the material in the Mary Wroth bio actually helps me to think about the character of the Duchess of Malfi, or what John Webster's doing with his play. Okay, so there's the character and there's the play. Again, these are things that are being written in the same period, and so you know the description or some helpful material about one thing might actually help us with another. This is one way in which I certainly built my sense of any period, was always trying to be attentive to the connections, always trying to help myself by not just taking things in as a blanket assertion, but looking for the clues, because I'm coming I'm coming afterwards. I'm trying to put it all together. I can't read everything, so how can I make the best use of what I am reading? And so, for example, I'll point to this in a moment, but something that's said about the way in which Mary Wroth saw her heroines in her poetry and in her fiction, if it resonates, that description resonates when I'm looking at the Duchess of Malfi herself, well, maybe there's something there. Maybe this could be helpful. Okay, and that sort of thing. I'm a bit of a sponge. I'm a bit of a ball of wax that things stick to. And, and the other thing is, the more you know, the more you can know, or the more you can make connections, and understanding how connections really do illuminate things, that's knowledge. And if you can, and again, it's a hard thing to describe, because there's that idea of like, well, on the one hand, I'm encouraging that you accept certain things and use it as a model, maybe test it scientifically, as it were. At the same time, you don't want to be gullible. You want to just, bow to authority. On the other hand, most of the material in the Norton has been vetted. Okay, it's been peer reviewed, it's been checked. They got the giants in the field to write all this material for us. Or at least their grad students wrote it, and then they signed off on it, whatever the case may be. But there's a lot of helpful material in the Norton, which is why way back when, in I believe 1981, I bought my copy in a hardback. Okay, I'll shock you. It cost $11.95 for the 4th edition. It's criminal how little Anglo-Saxon was in here compared to our book. But that's good for you, because I love Anglo-Saxon material, as you know, and we needed more here. I had to take multiple classes in order to get any of that Anglo-Saxon material, which is important. All right, back to the Renaissance. Okay, I'm going to use my old notes, which are still, most of them are still pretty good, from undergrad when I talk about Johnson and Donne. Okay, I have other notes too. I have more fresh notes, but these are still good. But Mary Wroth's not even in here, and she should be. Okay, she really should be. All right, Mary Wroth. When I was driving one time, probably 3 years ago, I scribbled some notes about Mary Wroth, and it was individual voice, dramatic scene, mythological references, dream vision, existential erotic dilemma, sense of anguish, of suffering, of outrage, and of powerlessness, and the problem of tyranny. Okay, so in the 10th edition, the Mary Wroth stuff all starts on pages, it starts on page 1110 and following. Okay. I'll come back to some of those key notes. All right. Mary Wroth. In your Norton, on page and by the way, the 10th edition and the 9th edition agree with this material. Different pages. I'm giving you the 10th edition pages because that's the one I ordered, but I'm also using my notes today from this one. I checked to make sure that things were correct, and I checked for the proper page numbers for you. Okay, so on page 1110, Mary Wroth. Okay, born 1587, died, we think, 1651. All right, and there's a little painting illustration of her with some allegorical resonance. That's worth looking at. Quote, Lady Mary Wroth was the most prolific, self-conscious, and impressive female author of the Jacobean era. I was really impressed by this, by the way, because, you know, I was in a female poor time of academia when I was an undergraduate. It was just the classic Jane Austen, the Bronte sisters, Virginia Woolf, things like that. I mean, it was back in the 80s. Anyway, grad school, I got opened up my eyes to more figures like this when I was taking Renaissance stuff. And then when I came back to teach, I was very happy to discover more female writers. And I wish I could include more. I have to hit the high, anyway, I have to hit Johnson and Donne, and I have to hit Milton. All right. I'm hoping that having the Duchess of Malfi, a very powerful and I find sympathetic, attractive main character, attractive in the same way that Hamlet is attractive to me. Okay. All right. Mary Wroth. Lady Mary Wroth was the most prolific, self-conscious, and impressive female author of the Jacobean era. Her published work, 1621, includes two firsts for an Englishman: a 558-page romance, The Countess of Montgomery's Urania, which includes more than 50 poems, and appended to it a Petrarchan lyric sequence that had circulated some years in manuscripts. 103 sonnets and elegant songs titled Pamphilia to Amphilanthus. Wroth left unpublished a very long but unfinished continuation of the Urania and a pastoral drama, Love's Victory, also a first for an Englishwoman. I underlined the next part. Her achievement was fostered by her strong sense of identity as a Sidney, heir to the literary talent and cultural role of her famous uncle, Sir Philip Sidney, her famous aunt, Mary Sidney Herbert, Countess of Pembroke, who may have served as mentor to her, and her father, Robert Sidney, Viscount Leo, author of a recently discovered sonnet sequence. But she used that heritage transgressively. Okay, she's breaking tradition. But she used that heritage transgressively to replace heroes with heroines in genres employed by the male Sidney authors, notably Philip Sidney's Astrophil and Stella and the Countess of Pembroke's Arcadia, transforming their gender politics and exploring their poetics and situation of women writers. Okay, as you read further, she comes from privilege. I mean, frankly, that's how she was able to do what she did and get published. Okay, but she didn't just rest on that privilege, right? She used it to explore. She used it to strike out, however conventional her poems might seem to you. I mean, a sonnet might seem like a sonnet, but I find this interesting. And the sort of thing of like, when I'm looking for, what else shall I read? Okay, I'm interested in more Mary Wroth. Okay, you know, read all this material, please. It's useful. I find it interesting. Let's go down a little bit, a couple paragraphs. The significant names in the title of Mary Wroth's Petrarchan sequence, Pamphilia, all loving, to Amphilanthus, lover of two, are from characters in her romance who at times shadow Wroth and her lover Pembroke. The Petrarchan lyric sequence had long served as a major genre for analyzing a male lover's passions, frustrations, and fantasies, and sometimes his career anxieties. So, I underlined this next point. So, although the sonnet sequence was becoming passé by Wroth's time, It was an obvious choice for a woman poet undertaking the construction of subjectivity in a female lover speaker. Wroth does not, however, simply reverse roles. Pamphilia addresses very few sonnets to Amphilanthus, and seldom assumes the Petrarchan lover's position of abject servitude to a cruel beloved. I underline this next part. Instead, she proclaims subjection to Cupid, usually identified with the force of her own desire. This radical revision identifies female desire as the source and center of the love relationship and celebrates the woman lover poet's movement from the bondage of chaotic passion to the freedom of self-chosen constancy. Okay, that idea, subjection to Cupid, right, who is the goddess, Cupid is Venus's, child. He's the little love that shoots the arrow at you. Okay. And, subjecting Cupid, usually identified with the force of her own desire. So on the one hand, we have this outer figure on the, but again, this interplay between outer and inner, and where does love come from? I recommend the next part, even though it's talking about her romance, which we're not reading, that emphasis on married heroines as opposed to single, or married mistresses, etc. But even as we keep reading in that section, she starts talking about heroism. And again, I will read something like this, hoping it'll help. And in this case, this is the part that I think might be interesting in terms of the Duchess of Malfi. Okay, so I'm still reading in the intro part here from Mary Wroth. The male heroes are courageous fighters and attractive lovers, but all are flawed by inconstancy. For Wroth, true heroism consists of integrity and love despite social constraints and psychological pressures. Okay, right there. I mean, on the one hand, Antonio is a good guy, but he's no match for the Cardinal and Ferdinand and Bassola, their agent. And the Duchess, she marries beneath her, right? For Wroth, true heroism consists of integrity and love despite social constraints and psychological pressures. That's a quick description of the Duchess, right? Okay, see, reading these things can be really helpful. All right. Okay. Let's now look at, rather quickly, two of her poems. Okay. Dun, dun, dun. Oh, the prose. So one reason I'm not giving you Sir Philip Sidney, her uncle's prose, or Mary Wroth's prose, is it's in here. It's not as famous as the poetry. I tend to think, and this would really be the case if it were in person instead of remote teaching, I feel that most of my students need more help with all readers, not just my friends as well as my students. There's more payoff in the poetry. The period is more famous for the poetry than the prose, and these prose pieces, it's a style that's frankly not to my taste. Both Wroth and her uncle, the prose. There's an indefiniteness in the way things are expressed, a suspension of meaning for the sake of a leisurely, urbane style. Whereas the poetry is usually to the point. It might be flowery. It might be deeply embedded in a classical framework that we have to read the footnotes for, or maybe you've studied it up and so you can recognize things. It tends to be a Romanized as opposed to a Greek mythological framework. Jupiter, not Zeus. Neptune, not Poseidon. Okay. But let's look at just two quick things. So first is on page 1115 in the 10th edition, we have a song, Love, What Art Thou? Okay. This is a favorite game of all of these poets in the period, the Renaissance. Far more so to pursue this idea of trying to define love, trying to explain love, trying to capture love's essence, trying to work out the permutations of how love really works. That's such a Renaissance project. We had, we didn't get much love in the medieval period, partly because it was, monks writing it all down. It took us getting into the Anglo-Norman, etc., and, Middle English. Okay, but this idea of love. And so here we have this poem on page 1115, and it's a song, okay? And it's meant to be, there's a note about who's singing it, that sort of thing, but notice the structure. Every stanza asks the question, love, what art thou? What are you? Okay. Love, what art thou? A vain thought in our minds by fancy wrought? Idle smiles did thee beget, while fond wishes made the net which so many fools have caught. Not, okay, which have caught so many fools. It's that poetic inversion. Okay? Fancy is not quite the same as imagination. Fancy, and I know this from looking at the use of the word fancy and the use of the word imagination throughout this material. That's how you assess how a culture uses a word. So it's a little less serious. It's a little less powerful of a sort of quality than imagination usually. And yet, is fancy being used because it's only 2 syllables and then it's got an F at the beginning of it? It's hard to know exactly sometimes. So again, look at the structure. We're trying to answer this. What are you, love? Love, what art thou? A vain thought in our minds by fancy wrought? Idle smiles did thee beget, while fond wishes made the net which so many fools have caught. Idle smiles did thee beget. Well, it's what? Flirtation at a party? Someone like gives some, yeah, you're attractive. I'll smile at you. And the other one's like, and then fond wishes. Oh, I wish he or she were my partner. Okay. So there's a benefit to figuring out the story behind even just a short few lines like that. Okay. Love, what art thou? Light and fair, fresh as morning, clears the air. Okay, we went positive. So the first was a net, right? Idle looks, a net catches you. That was negative in the first stanza. The second stanza starts out much more positively. But too soon thy evening change makes thy worth with coldness range. Still thy joy is mixed with care. Always, still, sometimes means still the way we mean it. It more often means always. Always thy joy is mixed with care. And often there's a note off to the side glossing that still. Because still means quiet, continuing. That's what we often mean when we say still. But still waters run deep, right? That's the quiet. But then still, it's still continuing. It's always happening. Okay. Love, what art thou? A sweet flower once full blown, dead in an hour. Dust in wind as staid remains as thy pleasure or our gains, if thy humor change to lour. Love, you change a little mind. I mean, one, it's going to go over quickly anyway because it's mortal. That is this feeling. And like a flower, boom, the blossom's gone. But also, like, if you change your mind, right, that's the problem of having a god shooting those arrows involved in this. Love, what art thou? Childish, vain, firm as bubbles made by rain. Wantonness, thy greatest pride. These foul thoughts thy virtues hide. But babes can no staidness gain. Love, what art thou? Causeless cursed. Yet alas, these not the worst. Much more of thee may be said. But thy law I once obeyed. Therefore say no more at first. It's out of context, so I don't really know exactly how the conversation is working. But we can look at the way in which we have this ongoing conversation with love. And one of the things I emphasize, whether it was sonnets or the other short poems, we have a speaker in a situation. It's a dramatic performance. Okay. Next, I want to do one more. I want to do one of these sonnets from her sonnet sequence. Pamphilia, all lover, to Amphilanthus. Pamphilia by the ending of the name is female. Amphilanthus by the ending of the name is male. Okay, and the notes tell you that some of this could be Mary Wroth talking about Pembroke, her lover. But again, it's always dangerous to definitely, poets often, I mean, come on, everybody, if you tell a story to a friend, you might move it a little bit further from your exact experience for effect. Poets often do that. You know, sometimes they start in reality, but you know, they want that emotional effect, and so exaggeration, changing things, etc. Okay, so I rarely do the. Okay, let's move to Shakespeare for a minute. Shakespeare was at least bisexual. Okay, he writes all these poems to a young man. They are not just about being buddies. There's deep devotion. Younger man than himself. Probably better off socially than himself. This is in the sonnet sequence. And then and lots of positive love. Also, like, you know, frustration. Okay. I'm probably contradicting myself a little bit. But anyway, but in the sonnets also, there's a female figure. But almost always when Shakespeare, who seems to be using his own case, like Mary Wroth seems to be using her own case at least some of the time. Shakespeare seems to be using his own case some of the time. When he gives in to the dark lady, she's got dark hair instead of the blonde, which is the standard beauty. Blue eyes blonde is standard beauty in Shakespeare's time. She's dark-eyed, dark-haired, and she's definitely a beauty. But, you know, he's drawn to her. He feels lust, and that's the word he tends to use. Okay. Anyway, I got off on a sidetrack trying to look at this thing about biographical details. And what I meant to do is say, looking at the evidence, like, okay, here's my point. Whatever Shakespeare's reality was, the Shakespeare, that is, the speaker of the sonnets in his sequence, comes across as bisexual, more homosexual, in the emphasis on true love and deep feeling for the young man, but having the lust and sort of a certain self-disgust for giving in to the dark lady. So maybe that helps me know things about Shakespeare. He certainly understood this dynamic in order to write such good poetry about it. Doesn't mean that was himself necessarily, because if he's trying to if he's trying to impress the young man, he might say, oh yeah, I lusted for her, but it was horrible, whatever he might say, right? Again, I tend to think dramatically. Okay, that was my Shakespeare excursion here, however many minutes this just was, is meant really, so in class I would do this and I'd write on the board and try to make it clear. Okay, my real point was, we can make guesses about autobiography and biography. And we don't know how far to take that unless we have corroborating evidence in some other form, legal papers, diaries, etc. I can approach this. This is what English majors and people who like to read, in the best sense, are good at. Well, based on the evidence at hand, what do I know about the speaker? Okay, you can do that with Mary Wroth. Whatever it might mean about herself and Pembroke, she has presented a character, and we don't have all that many sonnets to read like we do with Shakespeare. Shakespeare's much more famous, etc., etc. But you could still come up with a, you know, sort of a, if you were going to turn the poetry into a play, okay? Because I did give you a creative possibility. If you were going to turn this into some sort of a write-up for a play, looking at all this material that we have, and we don't have much from Mary Wroth, what would be our character? How would we need to direct and play this figure of the poet? Okay? Okay, I think that helps with what I was trying to do with Shakespeare for a moment, but let's go back to Mary Wroth. Okay. Um, the number one. So we have this um, Pamphilia to Amphilanthus, number one. Notice how we get a dream vision in here, and how medieval is that? We started with dream visions, right? The rude, the dream of the rude, the wanderer dreaming when he sleeps in the boat, right? He dreams of being in the hall, the way it used to be with his lord and his comrades, but then the bird noises wake him up. Um, uh, we had a dream vision with Chanticleer, right? He has that dream, and good old Bertolotte gets mad at him for being afraid in his dream. Okay, or of his dream. All right. So number one, it's from page 1116. All right. When night's black mantle could most darkness prove, and sleep death's image, did my senses higher from knowledge of myself, then thoughts did move swifter than those most swiftness need require. In sleep a chariot drawn by winged desire I saw, where sat bright Venus, queen of love, and at her feet her son still adding fire to burning hearts which she did hold above. But one heart flaming more than all the rest, the goddess held and put it to my breast. Dear son, now shut, said she, thus must we win. He her obeyed, and martyred my poor heart. I waking hoped as dreams it would depart. Yet since, O love, O me, a lover I have been. Think about this dream vision, okay? So there it is. You know, when it gets really, really dark in the darkness of the night, it's conducive to sleep. Again, when night's black mantle could most darkness prove, and sleep death's image. The negativity of that, okay? And then this is lots of Shakespeare works with this. Donne's going to work with this in a couple of minutes if I continue. Death be not proud, that's what I'm thinking of. But what a negative connotation, right? Death's image. That makes sleep sound kind of sinister. Power of mood, right? Okay, connotation. And, but in sleep a chariot drawn by winged desire I saw, where sat bright Venus, queen of love, and at her feet her son, that's Cupid, still adding fire to burning hearts, which she did hold above. Okay, so here's the heart she's holding. I should have brought a match or something, or light. I don't have a lighter. Okay, so Venus, queen of love, goddess of love, is holding the heart. Boyo, right? Cupid is like lighting it. We're burning these things. And so this one, but one heart flaming more than all the rest. This one's burning so hot. Venus tucks it into her chest. That is the speaker, the Mary Wroth character, I'm calling it. And ever since then, she's got that burning flame just going. Okay, I burn for you. An old relationship. I don't know if you still say this, but in my day and all the way back until Roman times, frankly, we talk about an old relationship, a love relationship, as an old flame. Okay. But wow, and now, dear son, now shut, said she, thus must we win. This is how we win. In a sense, it's almost like cheating. She's being attacked by the queen of love, who's putting a burning heart into her chest. He her obeyed and martyred my poor heart. Okay, sacrificed for the cause of love. I waking hoped as dreams it would depart, but since, oh me, a lover I have been. I hoped it was just a dream. Dreams fade away. But you know what? Nope, this is true. This is a true dream vision. Okay. Number 16 is about resistance. Am I thus conquered? Have I lost the powers that to withstand which joys to ruin me? Must I be still while it my strength devours and captive leads me prisoner, bound, unfree? Love, desire, making her servile, tyranny, At the end of that poem, but oh, my hurt makes my lost heart confess I love and must. So farewell, liberty. The tyranny of love. Here. I find this fascinating. Number 39, there's this emphasis on eyes and what you see and what comes in through your eyes and what you look upon. 40, false hope, tyrants. Again, hope kills the heart and tyrants shed the blood. For hope deluding brings us to the pride of our desires, the farther down to slide. This is anguish stuff. This is, trying to look, no, 64, love like a juggler comes to play his prize. It's like, oh man, like a juggler. 68, my pain. And here, this is a poem about a shipwreck. Yeah, you may remember, I didn't talk about this, but one of the Wyatt poems compares the feelings he has towards his beloved, who he cannot apparently, he's frustrated in love. This is Wyatt, Thomas Wyatt, way back, a couple weeks, few weeks, month and a half. And, there's a poem about it's love is like a shipwreck. And here we go. We have a refinement of that same image, which I believe they're both taken from Petrarch, the Italian master. But that was all fine in this period. Okay. Mary Wroth, well worth your time. I'm actually going to give you a extra credit assignment in which, I suggest that you go read an entire sonnet sequence. This is out there in the internet, in the world, in its entirety, and report back what you find. Okay. Nobody needs to do any extra credit for this class. And because I'd rather have, your Renaissance paper, then extra credit doesn't make up for that. Let's put it that way. Okay. But I'm going to offer it because some people like to have projects and chase them. I've done extra credit pieces after our classes. I didn't write them out entirely, but I followed through the ideas in extra credit assignments after a class is done. Sometimes right after, sometimes years later when I found the piece of paper and in my files, as it were. And yeah, I think I'll just stop. Okay. I hope you're doing well. Mary Wroth.